there's no need to be extravagant when there's nothing we can take with us to the graveyard except our shroud. We have never been able yet to resist the temptation of temptation. We have never been able to stand strong for principle if it meant that we had to save or be careful or we had to be thoughtful or generous. These things have got to come in change, and they've got to come pretty soon. So we have now the three moments of time: the past, the present, and the future. The past we messed up pretty badly. The future we could mess up if we get around to it the wrong way. And in the middle is now. And now is the human mind. It is the mind as an instrument of knowledge. A mind capable of common sense. A mind that is not trained into ineptitude by false educational standards. A mind that thinks, and thinks simply, and thinks in the common fact way, and recognizes the fact that if we expect to survive, we must stand firmly for the processes and changes that assure survival. This morning we have a very interesting subject that not only goes back to the old philosophies, but also comes down to modern times. And that is this problem that we have of time itself, the past, the present, and the future. There is an old saying in the philosophies that the past is dead, the future is unborn, only the now is actually available to us. There is much more to it than that, but I'd like to point out that for most purposes, our present humanity functions on these three levels. And the ones who live in the past and the ones who live in the future, so to say, are the ones that have become of interest to psychiatrists and psychologists, because they are the ones that accumulate a variety of peculiarities. The problem of living in the past is a distinct failure. Most everyone we know somewhere is tied to memories. Memories of childhoods, memories of broken homes, memories of delinquent children, all kinds of memories. Many of these memories are more or less negative, and many of the people who have them are more negative. And the result becomes a long cycle of self-pity, a great many problems in which the individual feels that he has been unjustly treated, and also gradually comes to live in his own misfortunes. Many of these people go off by themselves and live as hermits, or separate from their families and relatives and live in a retirement home. Many of them are more or less unhappy about society. They feel that they have been shortchanged. They believe that in one way or another they have been mistreated by those around them and those near to them. So that this phase of life presents us with the glory of the past of wars, the past of crime, the past of wealth and poverty, the past of sickness and death. There is a long story behind this past. This thing that is gone and dead, actually, is very much alive in the subconscious and subjective of human beings. And in school, of course, we are reminded of this very strongly. Not only are we told about the miseries of the past, but in the past also, many of the wonderful things we have done, like inventing gunpowder and things like that. We also find, then going back, that our families and our communities and our countries have been unfairly treated. We have been enslaved by some powerful despot, and generations have gone into difficulties. We therefore have a certain pity for persons like ourselves and a strong resistance against the persons who have done the things that we seem to remember were not kindly. So in the past there is a great big puddle of trouble, and many people today live in it. And when we read the newspapers in the morning, there's a good reason to remember it, because a large part of news journalism is based upon the past. It is based upon things that happen which are now revenge. They are based on all kinds of mistakes that were made, of all kinds of infamies that were committed, and the modern individual sits down and begins to realize that these past things are largely responsible for his present troubles. So he gets a very negative attitude toward the past. The past to him is a symbol of failure, a symbol of contact with things that were unfair and unreasonable. Of course, there were exceptions to these things. In our old New England, why, we used to have old families. They were very proud of the fact that they never had a new thought in 5 generations. This was a symbol of loyalty. It was also something that helped them to keep up the good old golden days and ways. They were the ones who established rules that today nobody could keep. But to these people, these rules were elegance. They were the sign of refinement. They were the signals of people who really amounted to something. So that lots of families have elders who are important. Then there were also families that had elders that were significant as citizens. There were some who were great in business, some who were great in religion or philosophy. There were educators. And in every family or two, there were 1 or 2 people who did something that was interesting, unusual, perhaps meritorious, and perhaps not. But anyway, they did something. And they become the family heroes. And on a larger scale, the national heroes, the world heroes. And we remember in the past, we remember not only Pythagoras and Plato, but Napoleon and Genghis Khan. And we begin to recognize that we inherit from the past memories that are important and memories that are very bad. That brings us to another condition. Why not recognize that this past is a sort of textbook? And if we read it correctly, we will find why it died, why the past isn't with us anymore, factually, and lives on largely in the loyalties of the living to the beliefs and spirits of the dead. So we go on with this type of thing and try to find out just exactly how much we are indebted to the past for what we are. So first thing the average person can do is sit down, take a piece of paper and a pencil, and sit down and try to figure out the things in his own past that have affected him. What kind of parents did he have? Now, the parents are all gone probably by now, but they still live in him. And if he feels that they were unfair, this unfairness may still be influencing him. This unfairness made him run away from home and marry when he really didn't want to start a family when he was not mentally, emotionally stable enough to do so. Thus the past got him into trouble. And the conditions of the past have overshadowed his life all the way into whatever condition he is, or perhaps beyond to the grave. So we have to think of the past rather carefully. But we also have to realize, with a psychiatrist, that these negative thoughts are a form of sickness. The individual who can estimate his own failings in terms of what other people did to him is already sick in another way. If we try to find out that the reason we've been unhappy is because we were born into the wrong family, this is not factually sound. It is excusable. It has been generally accepted. But actually, each person if he uses the resources given to him by nature, has a personality of his own, and can decide how he intends to live. If he has no intention of trying to find out how to live, then he becomes a victim of pressures from the outside, and then soon he becomes a psychiatric patient. So we have to realize that a lot of mental illness is affecting people who are unable to escape from their own past. And this continues all the way. Now, in our generation, the past may not be very far away. There are broken homes that have been broken in the last 6 months. 6 months ago was in the past, but very shallow. It was so near that it represents almost a part of our daily living. But actually, the moment an individual finds out, to his own content and assurance, that he is living in the past, that he is remembering old grudges, that he is remembering that he wasn't the favored child, but he remembers that the family broke up and he was sent off to school or to relatives he never knew. All these different negative things, that he had to go into the army and that ruined his life, that he made a bad marriage and that ruined his life. And on that basis of thinking, it's not difficult to be ruined 8 to 10 times during the course of an embodiment. Everything that once starts to go bad or starts to go negative has a tendency to deepen in that direction. So we have to look at people today and see if we can find ways to get them out of the doldrums that come from memories. And memories can be very tricky things. They can be very beautiful things. But the perverse memories can be a very sad and disheartening aspect of our compound constitution. So we have to try to figure out what to do with these people. One thing is to try to move this individual from the past into the present, into the now. Actually, the now is the only reality that we have. The reality of now is that at this moment I can make a decision. I can make it of my own accord. I can make it as I feel is best. A minute after I've made it, it becomes part of the future, or becomes part of our own past. But there is a moment when now permits us to change, that now permits us to do something differently, that enables us to break this pattern. After we have put in this new pattern, it may become a tyrant in time also, but for a moment it may release us from a misery that has carried us all through the years of life. So we do try to remember that no matter what has happened to us that is unfavorable, there is now a moment of understanding, a moment of realization, a moment of acceptance, and also a moment of realization that the longer we nurse the trouble, the sicker we'll get. So where pressures get very heavy, where sorrows get very heavy, some turn to alcohol, some turn to narcotics, some commit suicide, and a few start to think. And in starting to think, a new pattern comes in. A pattern that we know that for one moment we are master of our destinies. Once we have proclaimed our mastership and have decided our destinies, it had better be something more important than we've had before, or we'll be right back where we were. But it is quite possible for the individual to make a new start any moment of his life. He can have a start at 3:04, and he can have another start at 3:05. And that time, 3:04 is part of history. There is a moment of decision every moment of our lives. And it is the decision of that moment that is the basis of growth, the basis of the individual asserting himself over the providence which he finds objectionable. Now, if he makes another bad decision, he is in more trouble. But he still has made it. And perhaps out of a new decision comes a new realization of values in the future.